Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here with you guys today, and we're back. That's all I got. What are we talking about today?
Boundaries.
Yes. So I thought it would be good to kind of leap off of our last one a little bit, talking about like depression, anxiety, and stuff like that, and kind of go into maybe an area that can help in that. Maybe. I'm not great at boundaries, so I would love to talk about boundaries.
Jenny's like, I need to get my notebook out. I got to take some notes.
This is Jenny's therapy session
Probably
today,
all of us
so.
do. Okay, so the other day I was talking to someone who is a part of a class here at our church. It's kind of like this foundations of the faith thing. And so a specific person said, if I cannot forgive someone who has hurt me, can I follow Jesus? I mean, as point blank as that, because there's the passage that she was quoting of as you have been forgiven, forgive others.
Right.
And the opposite of that is, so he is going to forgive us according to how you forgive. And so in her head, it was this idea of, because I cannot forgive someone who has hurt me, who it was horrible. Do I have to come to a point of complete and utter forgiveness and be at peace before I can follow Jesus? And so this idea of boundaries came up, of that forgiveness can happen, but at the same time, you're able to say, I don't ever want to talk to you ever again. I forgive you, but this is done. There's this idea of toxicity.
Right.
There's this idea of health. There's this idea that some people just aren't good for us, or some people are good for us in tiny quantities, or those sorts of things. And trying to understand who people are, and how to have the best heart health for ourselves, so that people can function to the best of who they are.
I feel like we should come up with a definition of boundaries. How should we
really
define
good.
it?
I just thought in my head, like, how about the four of us create a song? Like, that was the first thing I thought in my mind. I'm like, let's do it. It was like, that was dumb. That was very
Shame
dumb.
on you.
Yeah.
We could make a song.
Yeah.
Or we could
How would
shit
you
into it.
define boundaries? Like
For me, boundaries...
Relational,
Yeah,
obviously.
for sure. Like, boundaries are these things that we intentionally choose to honor in our own life to protect ourselves and our own mental health.
And I think there's a moral thing to it as well, for your own personal morals. And, because my boundaries will be very different than Stetson's,
Yeah.
when it comes, like, I think it's very much a personal thing. And for family units as well, I think family units need to establish their own boundaries. I've learned this very, huge with my husband and everything. We've had to set some boundaries with family and things like that. Whereas I don't know if I would say I didn't grow up with an example of good boundaries, but I definitely grew up in the feeling of trying to make everybody happy, that was kind of my role. And so for a person that enjoys fun and setting a boundary is sometimes the opposite of that. So it's health, but it's not fun, and so it becomes very difficult to.
All right. So before jumping into boundary application,
Okay.
it would be so fun for us to take some time to just do like a popcorn thing of here's the things that boundaries are, or here's what boundaries aren't.
Oh.
Or something like that.
Okay.
So I would say boundaries are personal.
Yes.
So for instance, there isn't here's what a boundary is, and it should be applied across the board to everybody.
Yeah.
For instance, I have a boundary that I have to be in bed by 10 o'clock.
Okay.
I know that if I'm up past 10, bad things happen. Okay? And so if people try to engage me after 10, I'm sorry. I just can't. So boundaries are personal.
I would say boundaries aren't mean. Like, I'm not doing this out of malice. I'm not doing this to punish you.
That's good.
Yeah.
I think boundaries are at its core saying no to something.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would argue boundaries are also loving to yourself and to other people.
Boundaries aren't dependent on the other person.
Boundaries can be confusing to the other person without clarity.
That's good. That's good.
Another one is boundaries are not rigid. So there is some flexibility in that where it's not this is what it always is. Like for me, there's
10
exceptions.
o'clock, 10 o'clock.
Well, right. But like if I call KJ at 10:30 and say,
I will
I
answer the
need
phone.
you right
Yes.
now.
That's good.
Like, so
That's good.
there are these guidelines, but there's also some flexibility when you need to have that.
I think some boundaries have an expiration date where they've served their purpose and you don't need that boundary anymore.
And some boundaries do not. Some boundaries are eternal.
They are eternal.
Last
Yep.
forever.
Yep.
Yep. All right, that's cool.
I like
so
that.
so tell me what inspires someone saying, I think I need to set a boundary here.
Like in the sense of like what would make somebody want to do that?
Yeah. So if I'm talking to someone and they are sharing about something, tell me the thing that's going to cause me to say, hey, I think it's time to set a boundary, or it'd be great to set a boundary here.
Yeah. So a couple things come to mind for me when I'm talking with people. One is exhaustion.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm talking to somebody and they're exhausted and they're like, I'm just like burning the candle at both ends. It's like, okay, you might need a boundary. And then another one is if somebody is constantly living kind of in this frantic state where they're always frazzled, I would say maybe you need some boundaries on the things that you're doing.
All right. So in terms of a personal boundary, that's
Correct.
that. Okay. How about boundaries that involve other people? Jenny? Yeah. Like, yeah.
Rephrase the question one more time.
So tell me the thing that's going to cause someone to say, I think I should create a boundary here.
In this relationship?
Yeah. Because especially in the church, our heart is always so good and it has a desire to create peace and fix everything. But there are times you just can't. And I think there are some personalities that enjoy chaos, enjoy drama, enjoy those things that are just exhausting. I think so. Stetson found this term that I thought was amazing. The whole vampire term.
Oh, yeah, an energy vampire.
Yeah, explain that, because that was so like, oh my gosh, I love this.
Okay,
It
so
is spooky season.
it comes from the show. It's a comedy.
Energy
It's a
vampire.
satire. Yeah, but so I won't get into the show, but in the show, like it's this literal thing where there's these vampires that walk around, and instead of like feeding off of people's blood, they feed off of people's energy. And so the character in the show, it's kind of like an office style show where you have like these side interviews in front of the camera, and he's explaining to the camera that he works in an office that has cubicles and fluorescent lighting because it's excellent feeding ground. And he just walks up to people and just starts the most draining conversations, and you can see the people just withering away. And then when he walks away, his eyes turn blue and he goes, because he just fed off of their energy. And when I saw that, I was like, it is real. Like, this exists. I knew it. I'm getting targeted by energy vampires.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, so a personal, I guess, or relational. I would think what I hear is parents basically saying like, I can't control my kid. They have like when all of a sudden you kind of see the shift in power has happened in the home, and like I'm just thinking of like friends and stuff.
Yeah.
That would be
As an example.
as an example
Okay, I was like,
of when you need to tell somebody it looks like a boundary needs to be set.
okay,
That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think for me on the relational one, it's if I walk away from an interaction and I am feeling some kind of emotion that is not mine to feel.
Yep.
So if they're trying to put their troubles or their struggles or their pain or their lack of whatever on me, and I walk away feeling like they're trying to make it my responsibility to fix this.
It's good.
So it's like I think it's really being able to pay attention to my own heart and how do I feel.
I think that whole thing I was bringing up of boundaries are personal. It comes to being in tune to your own heart. So if there is a consistent, if I'm around so-and-so and they keep pulling me in, and each time I feel exhausted, depleted, empty, angry, hurt, every time. Think about in senior high, that group of friends that you had, there was always someone who caused you to go home and be like,
Senior high.
I don't think they're good friends. It's that kind of thing. I don't think they're good friends, or I don't think I should spend time around this person. The older you get, it's harder to say that because you almost feel like everyone has to be a good friend, or I have to be a good Christian and create
coworker,
peace, coworker, to be able to say, I have to create a boundary here. Every time I'm around so-and-so, I feel exhausted afterwards or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a root of, like, I think if we were all really heartless and objective, like that defining line would be really easy, like when it came to it, of just like, oh, this is bad for me, I'm done. But I think the counterbalance to that is this sense of, okay, that was rough for me, but this person really needs somebody right now. And that's a really difficult quantum equation to figure out the answer to, of like, when is the detriment to myself so significant that I need to put the needs of this person aside? Like parenting is an example. It's rough, but like as a parent,
It's only going to get worse.
It's like I have this duty to care for this person. But I think there can be, like, somehow some of us get this idea in my heads of like, it is my duty to care for this person when that might not necessarily exist. And that also might be a realization of like, I don't have what this person even needs. And my attempts to like help them.
There's a scene in The Return of the King that has always stuck with me that has kind of really been the way that I approach this idea of boundaries. Like, so, obviously in ministry, there's a lot of people who come to us with a lot of different issues. And if we're not careful, we end up trying to take on those issues ourselves. So it's like, okay, your depression is now my depression and I have to carry this thing for you. And it can become a struggle as we try to figure out like, okay, how do we actually walk alongside of people in a loving and compassionate way that is helpful for them, but doesn't take on more than we need to. So do you guys remember that scene at the end of that movie, Return of the King? They're going up the mountain and Frodo has the ring, but like Frodo can't go anymore. And Sam previously in the movie, he had actually put the ring on. He's like, but I can't do that again. Like, that is not my burden to bear.
He was so tiny. He's a tiny person. If you think of how far he had to go.
But what Sam does, and this is so
Logistics
powerful.
out of the
Logistics just drives me nuts.
That's like twice as many steps.
I know. Yeah. I mean,
He
good
picks
for him.
Frodo up and he carries him and he says, I can't carry it for you, but I can carry you. And so not that like we necessarily carry people in that sense, but like that kind of perspective of, hey, your burden, your thing, whatever this issue is, like, it's not mine. Like, this is yours. But I can find a way to be able to carry you or to support you or to get you the things that you need in order to keep going up that mountain. Like, it's just a powerful scene that's stuck with me, that's helped me say no to a lot, while at the same time being compassionate to be able to say yes to the right things.
That's good. I think our whole idea of doing this past podcast and this one's all about health and being a healthy person. And
attempting to be a
there's that balance of like being able to see the capacities that you have. Like, so they're at a high capacity, I can be there for a ton of people, right?
Yeah.
There are some times, and I don't think it's just the average person, but that there are sometimes, and it's typically people I'm very close to that I feel very responsible to, that just by being around them for half an hour, all of the energy's gone. It's like I am done and I don't have anything to give to anyone. And so it's being conscious of, all right, so I am a human being, have a human soul, have a heart. I am not a superhuman. And that there are some people who invigorate me, that there are others who drain me. And some of the people that are closest to us are those who actually drain us drastically. So something I found, so a couple podcasts ago, I talked about baseball, and I enjoy talking about baseball. Is there are certain people who pitch who the goal is that they open the game and they're going to pitch for 5 to 6 innings a game, so about 142 pitches. Wow. And then there are some pitchers that are just built to pitch the final inning. Like their goal is to pitch
the closer,
12.
The clutch, basically.
Yeah, it's like they're coming in, they're able to throw a handful of insane pitches, and then they are toast. But compared to the other guys who open the game, the whole time, like they are very, very very intentional about each pitch, each person they're pitching to. The guy at the end of the game, he's just
throw that ball quick.
He is throwing a comet, right? And by experiencing this, I'm like, man, I feel like I'm that guy at the end of the game. There are other guys who can pitch a super long game. I only have I'm good in that spot. And so I've begun asking people, can I only sit here for a half an hour? So instead of a full hour long
meeting,
because I get burnt out, I get drained. In between times, I always book out extra time that I can spend by myself. So I have a boundary that if I'm going to be with someone and I'm pouring into someone, then I'm going to create space that I can pour into myself. So I actually have something to offer. Being able to see those things. But how does that play out at home? How does this play out in our personal, think about being parents. Think about the odds are that those times that you snap are probably because there hasn't been boundaries, right? So tell me how all this plays out at home as a parent, as a son, as a daughter, as all those things.
I can give an example of something that kind of is an unintentional boundary that has just kind of happened, but it's very much something we do and we practice. And that is, so after I pick up my girls from school, it's been a long day. They're a little overstimulated. We get home, and I always call it, I feel like, and I've talked about this with other parents and stuff, but when you get home from school, there's like this weird few minutes of total chaos getting in the house, from the car to getting all the stuff out of the car to putting away lunches to, like, in our case, we have a dog that, is all excited to see us. And so, it's like this weird little 3 to 4 minutes of total overwhelmingness for me. And so once everything is done, once everything is put away and, and kind of we settle for a second, we all kind of go to our own quarters. Like, my oldest goes to her room, my youngest and we take like a good 15 to 20 minutes just on our own, doing whatever they need, and I look forward to that time of day of just kind of like recentering, and then once, dinner's getting started, that kind of thing. It's like, then they kind of trickle out, or I'll call one of them out and that kind of thing. And then it's kind of like, okay, now let's start the evening. So it almost like resets the evening as opposed to, chaos and more, more talking, and I'm a talker, so I can drain the life out of people. But yeah, that I would say it's a unsaid boundary, but it's definitely something that we are all aware that we need and practice.
Good.
For me, home is the reason why probably 99% of my boundaries exist, of this mindset of like, I know we're not alone in this, but in our jobs, like there's this constant feeling of like we're needed for something, like we're needed for this thing or this people or this text or this phone call. Like we're needed just constantly by so many people or programs or staff or like whatever. And I'm sure so many people listening to this can relate. Like their jobs are really demanding of them. But in the back of my mind, like, and the thing is all those needs are very legitimate. Like, it's not like, no, that's ridiculous. It's like, oh yeah, like I kind of am needed. But in the back of my mind, I keep thinking, my kids have one dad and my wife has one husband. And that is the most important thing I'm going to do in my entire life. And if there's anything I need to save my capacity for, it's that. And if I'm letting people or situations or needs take me away from being a dad to my kids and a husband to my wife, my priorities are out of order. And no matter how legitimate of a need this thing is, if there is a greater need at home, too bad. Like to this other thing, it's like, I need to be home. I think it was you who said it, but just like taking on other people's burdens. Through counseling, my therapist like helped me come up with like a lot of tools to like think. Like there's just like a few sentences that he said that I think about this a lot. But like he says, like, don't take those people home with you. So he encouraged me. It's like, find like some sort of a symbol to remind yourself that you're home now when you come home. And so from
A pumpkin.
It is very old and smelly now.
Every day.
You can't throw it away.
A new one.
No, I learned about these from you, KJ, but I got a mezuzah, which it's...
Explain what that is.
Yeah, it's in the Jewish tradition, and correct me if I'm wrong here, you probably know about it more than I do, but it is the way that they literally practice the scripture that says, keep the word of God on your doorposts. So it's this little thin rectangular box, and inside is a scroll with scripture on it, and it's mounted
on the doorknob.
to the doorpost.
Yeah, okay, I have seen it.
So it's literally kept on your doorpost. And inside, like, is this little scroll written all these different passages in the Bible that are just like affirming. It's like God is in control. Like this person that I'm feeling responsible for, I'm not actually responsible for. Again, this phrase that my therapist said is like this mantra of like, God, I will be me and you be you, and that's enough. Like if I can just be what I can be, but you are going to be who you are, that's enough. And so like there are days, sometimes seasons where it's every day, but there are days where, we've got a garage connected to the house. So the door that leads from the garage into the house, there's a mezuzah there. And there are days where I come up the stairs to the door, but before going on site, I just put my hand on the mezuzah and just like remember, it's like, okay, I'm home now. And
That's good.
In Hebrew, like it says, blessed are those who enter and blessed are those who depart. And in just this sense of like, what I am about to walk into, I am very, very blessed. And when I leave this house to go to work the next morning, I'm blessed in that sense too. And between that time, I can just be home. And God has everything that I'm leaving behind. And that's a really difficult thing to do some days, but...
All right, so that brings up a couple other things. It brings up the idea of priorities. And I'd say priorities, and if there are priorities, it says that there's a limited resource of something that you have to prioritize, right? So that you create your boundaries, so that you accomplish this divvying out. So, so if the human capacity is like a battery, and you only have a certain amount of charge as you go out of the house, think about it from that perspective. That coming home, how much of our battery is in there
already,
and possibly if family is the priority, that type of thing. So, have you all thought about energy capacity to the priorities that you have, and how to intentionally engage the things that are important?
Yeah, like I definitely have, and this is why, when I think about boundaries for myself, like a big part of the boundaries that exist in my home is being able to recognize the things that I need to be able to operate at the kind of capacity I want to, as a husband, as a father, as somebody who is an employee at Christ Community. And so, like, my wife and I, we have this practice. So we do Sabbath, which is really cool. But we understand that for both of us, like, to Sabbath together, we're not actually going to get the things that we really need out of the Sabbath. Now, we'll find times to do that for one another. But we actually do our Sabbaths on different days. So she does Thursday, I do Friday. And then every once in a while, we'll find time to do something together on one another's Sabbath. But for her to be able to recharge in that space so that she can step back in Friday and be the mom she wants to be and be the wife she wants to be, for me to be able to do that on Friday so that I can step back into that place, like, that has probably been one of the most helpful things. And we don't just practice that on a weekly rhythm. Like, there are also daily rhythms of what this looks like for each of us. So for me, it's getting up at 4 a.m. and going down to my office and just being alone in silence for about 2 hours. Like, I know if I don't get that time, I'm going to be the guy who snaps, who doesn't have the energy. Because there's something about that is centering for my soul, that recharges my battery as I spend time with the Lord. Like, it is so good. For my wife, her time is actually 5:30 to 6:30, drinking coffee and just catching up on TikTok.
Her time is an hour compared to the 2 hours that you get.
Look, she
Everybody's
can
different.
I'm just
she
saying.
could get up at 4:30 if she wanted.
She chooses sleep.
But the reality is, like, these are kind of boundaries that we've had to establish for ourselves. So, like, when our kids try to get up at 6 o'clock, my wife goes, "Hey, no, like, go to your room, go to the front room, be somewhere else. This is my time." And that's where I think in the home, you've got to be able to kind of cast a vision for why boundaries exist. Because in that moment, if we haven't had these conversations with our kids about why we need this space and why we need this time so we can be better moms and dads to them, our kids are going to interpret that as unloving. What do you mean you don't want to spend time with me? It's like, well, no, kid, like, I actually want to enjoy the time that I spend with you. And I know that if I don't do this thing that I need to be healthy, then I'm rolling up on empty. And I don't want to be empty. I want to be full so that I can give the best of who I am to my family, to my spouse, to even my job. Like, we've got to find time to care for ourselves to be able to do that.
I remember, Stetson, you said something in a meeting one time that I thought was so good, and I'm going to butcher it, so I'm hoping you remember how to phrase it. But you were setting a boundary on when your phone would be on for phone calls and stuff. Yeah. And something you said that was so good was, you said, I give this job, these people, my 8 to 5. My family is deserving from 5 to 8, or so. It was something along those lines. Like, that is what they get.
Yeah, it was this recognition of, like, I'm given 8 hours a day to these people, this church, these programs, and I'm delighted to do it. Like, with my whole heart, I give of myself during those 8 hours. But it's this acknowledgement of, like, I only have a few with my family, and that is the more important thing. And since the ratio is already drastically different, those are a precious few hours. And
I loved that. And it's stuck with me, and it's definitely been one of those Like, obviously, our phones are an appendage of us. And I feel one of the boundaries I am trying to set with myself, and again, I say trying because I can't say I fully do this, but is putting this aside when we get home. Plugging it in, turning it upside down, and sometimes off, or silent. I don't think I ever turn it off. But getting it away, even if you just walk away from it and it's not in the same room, changes my mindset drastically on what I'm working on, whether that's even just cooking dinner, which I actually love to do, and it's very peaceful for me, but it's being intentional and not having that like side thing.
Yeah. All right. So boundaries can be from people. They can be from places. Like I'm going to create a boundary on this place. I don't want to go there. And they can be from things like our phones. So people, places, and things. So our conversation has been about family priorities. Are there times that boundaries have to be set inside the family or the extended family?
100%.
Toxic person. I just want to extend our conversation out a bit. I have a friend who she has this certain quantity of time that she can go on vacation, for instance, and her family believes that it all should be like her extended family believes
come see
that
us.
100% of their vacation time should be around family.
That's a trip, not a vacation.
Yeah. And so
That's right. That's right.
So I've been having these conversations about how to create boundaries and saying here's the vacation I'm doing so I can feel whole.
Yeah.
And then if there's a family, like, but that can play out just across the board. So talk about extended family priority, all that stuff.
I won't go into super detail just because it's personal, but so a while back, my husband and I set a boundary with some extended family, and it was a hard stop boundary. And it's kind of what you said, KJ, where it was the forgiveness is there, but I won't be a part of your life anymore, kind of thing. And I think the hardest part for me in making that boundary that I fully believed in was the effect it had on other people in my family that weren't making that choice. So my kids.
Yeah. Okay.
And struggling so much with how much it affected them in what they saw at the time, like that they didn't understand it, So I feel like when you talk about like family boundaries, it's not just a personal decision, it's affecting you or changing, it affects
everybody.
the entire family unit and differently.
So one of the things that I've noticed kind of in this world is my wife and I have had to set some of those up with family.
Too.
Like at the end of the day, everyone's going to be mad about what you choose. Like I've just kind of come to accept that reality. Whenever I put a boundary up, somebody's going to look at it and say, you're not doing enough. And if it's a different boundary, they're going to say that you're doing too much. And there's this phrase that my wife and I have been using. I forget exactly where it came from, somewhere over in Europe, but it's not my monkeys, not my circus. And so it's this idea that like, look, I am not responsible for the way that other people respond to or how they feel about this boundary that I'm putting up, right? We as a family, we are going to make the best decision for our particular family unit. And that may not be the most ideal for someone else. It's like, that's fine. Like they're not my responsibility. My job, like Stetson was talking about this, like, look, my kids have one dad. My wife has one husband. I want to make sure that we are the best that we are in this context. Now, having said that, like you do want to have compassion in some of this kind of stuff, right? And I think there are ways to be able to navigate some of these things in healthy ways. But at the end of the day, like it is really, really important to let people know, like, hey, we kind of are our own unit. Like, and we had to do that with like my family and my wife's family when we got married, and early on we'd spend all of our holidays with one part of the family, and one of our kids actually came to us, little Nolan, a couple years ago and said, "Hey, can we not do that anymore?"
I feel the tension.
and so but honestly, like my wife and I, as we talked about it, we're like, she's actually onto something here. And where we ultimately landed is, looking at my side of the family saying, "Hey, you guys can have 1 week a year." Looking at my wife's side saying, "Hey, you guys can have 1 week." And then our immediate family, we get the other one. And initially, there were parts of the family who are like, "Well, we don't like that. That's not what it's always been." And we're like, "Well, it's how it's gonna be." And so it's important to establish those.
I think it goes back to where boundaries can be confusing if you don't provide clarity in that. And whether they choose to understand it or not is fine. But I think it's super important. You can't set a boundary without telling the other person that you're setting it. That's not a boundary. That's just you doing what you want to do and frustrating people.
Right. Yeah.
And so it is so important to, if you're going to set that boundary, that you have a conversation, no matter how it's received, no matter the reaction, but it's setting that. And I don't expect anybody when I'm setting a boundary, kids included, to like it.
Yep.
That's not my expectation. But my expectation is for them to respect it.
So something that Pastor Bruce Hoppy has taught me, which I really think is brilliant. He always has these pictures for everything. He says, just because someone hits the tennis ball over the net, it doesn't mean you have to hit it back. And
that's good.
Yeah, I was like, man,
that.
I think about it all the time, because typically in setting a boundary, someone's going to be like, yeah, but don't you think about, and they're able to say that, but you don't have to hit the tennis ball back. You don't need to explain it. You don't have to play ball. It's just not good for me.
Yeah.
And that's it. Like it's just not good for me. It's not good for us.
Yeah.
It is not healthy for us, and so being able to have that self-control of I don't have to hit the tennis ball back. If so and so is just going to hit ball after ball after ball after ball, that's cool. At some point, that person is going to be exhausted, and but I don't have to play.
Right.
Jenny, your husband spoke at a parent conference we did a few weekends ago about like how parents can help their kids through their mental health journey. And what I love about Paul's take on that is he spent the whole time talking about the boundaries that parents need to have for themselves.
Yep.
And there was one kind of like philosophy that he talked about that's been like really helpful for me at home, but also defines the boundaries we've made with extended family. And he just talks about the value of quality over quantity of time. And that's what's behind a lot of the boundaries we've put on extended families.
Explain that a bit.
Okay, so
Yeah,
like
unpack it for
holidays
us.
and stuff. Like last Christmas, I think. There was it was last July. Yeah, it was
there yet.
Allie's grandma's like 120th birthday or something. Like she's very old.
That's not old. That's ancient.
Yeah.
She has history books about her,
It-
and she's still alive.
It was more 90 something. She's an incredible woman, by the way. But so all of the extended family came together, and Allie's siblings all live in Texas, and they all came out from Texas, and they were staying at her parents' house, and they live in Denver, so it's like an hour away. And her parents were like, we could shuffle things around so there's room for your family to sleep here too, so you didn't have to drive back and forth. And while that would have given us more time, the quantity of that time would just plummet because our kids would not
Quality
sleep
of the
well.
time.
Sorry, the quality. Yeah, the quantity of time would be huge, but the quality would just plummet because our kids would not sleep well. They're grumpy. We don't have a space of our own. We don't have time away to just decompress. And so we were just really honest about the fact it's like, okay, even though we technically get less time with the family by driving back and forth each night,
Better time.
the time that we are in Denver, we are fully present. We're well rested. We're happy to see them. We're not sick of anybody. Our kids are in a good mood. And so like, and it took us a while to get there because like for a while, holidays, like we'd come home and just be like, like we just pretended that was worth it when the
Because
reality
there's
is.
that idea over a holiday, you get all this time off that you should all be together and do it all together.
Right.
And it's exhausting.
Right.
Well,
yeah.
And I think with that perspective, it really reshapes the way that we show up to things, and we actually have to be much more intentional about it. So when we're creating boundaries, it's like we've got to have boundaries for ourselves within those boundaries. So if we go, hey, our boundary is like you guys get these 3 days a year or whatever it is, then we need to have a personal boundary because that's a boundary for them, right? All right, you get these 3 days. Well, then my boundary needs to be, okay, so when I'm there for those 3 days, I'm not working and I'm not doing other things. Like I am making sure that I'm fully present in this moment, because otherwise what's going to happen is you're going to show up, you're going to be distracted, you're going to be doing other things on the phone or whatever it is. And so everyone's going to walk away from that encounter frustrated, as opposed to if you show up with intentionality, it's like, no, like this was actually very life-giving. And so you think about that like in marriage, like what happens if a part of your boundaries are like, hey, once a week, we're going to go on a date. And it's like, okay, well, how good is that time going to be if you show up and you actually show up, right? You're not distracted by your phone or watching the sports game. Like you're actually engaging the heart of your spouse.
All right. So hypothetically.
Yeah.
Okay. I was want to put out a challenge here. Okay. So
Challenge!
There are the challenge
Accepted.
There's that idea of, so it is a healthy thing to have a date night once a week, right?
Never gonna happen.
That's the thing you hear, right?
Yeah.
And
It's a great idea, but when you got kids, good luck.
and so I think like a bunch of people do it, and it's just an exhaustive thing. So is it better to do it once a week and be like checking the box, or say once a month and truly elevate it?
It so depends on the couple.
Yep.
Like there are some people who right now what they need to do is go on a date once a week.
Yep.
Because they need to be connected and having conversations.
Right.
There's other people who are finding other ways to express their love and their connection. It's like, well, maybe once a month works better for you guys.
So it's
like,
a personal thing.
It's
as a
a
couple.
But it's a great
personal
question
thing.
to ask.
It
Yeah.
is. It's funny. I'm kind of stuck back on some of the stuff that you were saying, Stetson, because it made me think like the quantity versus quality. And really what you're doing is you're actually honoring the person more by giving him the quality. And it made me think of the National Lampoon's Vacation when the doorbell rings and the whole family's out there and the people inside, the family inside, hears this ding dong and it goes ding dong, ding dong. Like it becomes,
Ding dong.
yeah, it becomes this like, it's big, and it's like that's so true. That is so true.
What if though? Here's what what if the person that you're trying to prioritize actually values quantity over quality? So like their thing is like, I would prefer that it's horrible and you're unhappy and you're exhausted, but you're here,
right?
Compared to showing up whole,
I think that's an unhealthy way to look at it,
right? So
Yeah.
I'm trying to bring this up,
Yes. I think that also kind of teeters a little bit on the like family is everything.
Yeah.
right? Okay.
And
But like what if that's your spouse though? And your spouse is like, I want to be with you all the time. And then, the other one's like, well, I kind of need a little me time where I'm not there. And so like it's conversations. Like
I
really,
know. I
it's
just think
pretty
it's
sure I
important
had this
to,
conversation last
But-
night.
but what it really comes down to is, can both people articulate what their needs are and what their boundaries
Right.
are?
Yeah.
Because the loving thing to do in that kind of a context is to figure out, okay, well, how do we form boundaries together?
Yeah.
Right. There are personal boundaries, but there are relationships where it's actually, no, we need to figure this out together of what's going to work for us and make us both be the
good.
healthiest. And a lot of times there is compromise in that.
Yep. Okay. So hold on before you go there, because so our time could just spiral out of
Oh my
control, and I
gosh,
just
yes.
want to be honoring. So I want to pull back out again, just circling this idea that boundaries are personal.
Yes.
Okay. And so as people who are trying to be helpful to others or to come alongside people, so I've heard. I mean, I hear this all the time. A couple people are talking to each other. Someone brings up a problem, and then the other person will say, so it's time to set up a boundary here. Someone is counseling boundaries.
Right.
But boundaries are personal. And so how should I encourage people to have boundaries, or do I not encourage people to have boundaries? Or how specific should I get in the idea of trying to help somebody else out? Because the bunch of us as human beings have the tendency to put our own problems on other people.
Yep.
Okay. So in this whole podcast, so I can see people saying, "Oh, I have to talk to so and so about
Right.
creating boundaries,"
Right.
Or I need to, like,
Or I need to set some myself.
yeah, and like this whole idea. So how do I engage this content so that it's actually helpful and that it's not hurtful and harmful in the big picture?
I would say, think of a time, and I don't know, maybe you guys have never experienced this, but I've had people put boundaries on myself. And so how I react in those moments when somebody is asking for a boundary from me. And I think shifting your perspective a little bit on how would I react in that moment.
That's good.
Would I become defensive? Would I put it back on them? Would I make it more about me? Like that kind of a thing to try and justify my behavior, as opposed to seeing this person and going, okay, this is what they need from me to be a better friend, to be a better wife, to be a better mom, and just making sure that you're listening with in a compassionate place, that this person is setting the boundary because they want things to be better between the two of you.
So your question is it?
I probably didn't.
Hey,
answer that.
I see somebody
that's good.
who probably needs to put some boundaries up in their life,
Yeah.
and I need to talk to them. Okay,
Or it's like
so
that idea of like,
not
should I, or
and it's not like me establishing my own boundaries. It's
Right.
like, hey, there's some boundaries Stetson probably needs to put up here,
Yeah.
and I need to
probably not, because he has
Probably.
every
He's like
the
the
best
king.
boundaries ever. No, honestly, I think one of the best things you could do
fortress.
is
That's true.
yeah, he's like outside that meme outside the White House.
Crocodiles in it.
It's like, look at my door.
and the crocodiles breathe fire.
I think one of the best
And
things you could
locusts.
do is just ask permission. Be like, hey, I've noticed some things, like, and there's some ideas I have about some things that might make things healthier for you. Like, is it okay if I share those with you?
Right.
And if they go, yeah, like absolutely. And, talk about your own personal experience of these are some things that I put in place and here's what's kind of happened as a result. And I've noticed this about you. And I don't know, maybe this is something you want to explore. But when you ask permission and get consent, it often changes the entire tone of the
Yeah.
conversation. It's not you have to do
Oh,
this.
honey,
Well-
it's time to establish boundaries. Like, that's why. Like,
Well,
Yeah.
not everybody wants unsolicited advice, right?
Yeah, but when you get permission and you share out of your own personal experience, what somebody chooses to do or not do with that, like that's on them. That's not on you.
yeah.
It might be valuable to explore kind of like the deeper root of it. And these are questions that are good for us to ask of ourselves, of kind of like, is the quality worth the quantity? So if it's somebody else, like asking them, it's like, so this amount of time that you're spending with this person, like, do you feel like it's worth it? It's like, could the quantity be adjusted in a way that drastically improves the quality? So you're just asking questions instead of like saying, here's what you need to do. But then also just kind of like, if someone is being like severely impacted by their relationship from another person, and it's not like a holiday gathering with extended family, but like someone is like taking a toll on them, just like asking questions like, is the impact this person is having on your life appropriate? Like, is that okay? And
Is
maybe
the
it is.
impact that this person is having on your life appropriate?
Yeah.
That's like I would actually circle that question, and that applies to everything. Like that could be a friend, that could be someone at your job, it could be someone in your family.
Yeah. Like if
Probably
your
not your
boss.
kids.
but like
Yeah.
if my wife is really hurting emotionally from something that happened and I am feeling the full weight of that, that feels appropriate because of who she is in my life. If I ran into a stranger on the street and they unloaded their whole life story and I am now carrying their burden to the same degree, that would be inappropriate.
Yep.
That's good.
Man, it's the intentionality of the heart, right? It's how do I want to spend the battery? Like, do I have a battery capacity, healthy? And there's a lot of things here that I think the average person actually just doesn't think about or have the time to think about because there aren't boundaries even around that.
One final thought on that. It's important to know that the capacity of our battery is not static. Right. So based off of what we're going through and what season of life we're in, things shift in terms of what we can say yes to. Right. So when you're a young 24-year-old and you don't have a family, you can say yes to a lot more and your boundaries can be much wider. But when you're at home with 5 kids, well, your boundaries are going to have to look different.
That's good.
And even just like your age, all that stuff is going to shift. So it's like, I only say that because sometimes we might look at ourselves when we were younger and say, oh, I got to get back to that. I got to do that again. It's like, well, that would actually be inappropriate because you've changed and your capacity has changed and your battery is different now. And
That's
so
good.
You've constantly got to be evaluating with the Lord, what could I be saying yes to, or what should I be saying yes
and
to?
it's paying attention to yourself. Man, I was just thinking, I had this thought today, like I'm so thankful it's cold out again because I feel like I can do so much more. That I'm horrible in the heat. So I'm like the opposite of a typical battery, right? Like the alkaline batteries, they die in the cold. But that's how I feel in the heat. Like in the summer, it's just like, man, I can't do anything. And I just feel like, and it's like, it's finally cold again. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can conquer the planet. I can think, I can do all the things. And I think it's like, to be people who are intentional about our own hearts, our own souls, be talking to Jesus all the time. Who am I? What am I here to do? And how do I best accomplish it? You know, it's people aren't supposed to bear fruit in every season.
That's good.
The seasons are different. That's it. The seasons are different. And so that there are times that you are planted and you're going to grow. There are times that you bear fruit. There are times that the fruit falls to the ground and the leaves die. And there's time to clean up and there's a time to be buried and come back again. Like this is healthy. So don't expect to bear fruit all the time. It's impossible.
Yep.
I love that. So I wanted to add this just for listeners, especially ones that are watching on YouTube. But there's a comment section below.
Oh, yeah.
And we never invite you guys to like participate a little bit. And I would love to do that because we talk to people sometimes in the lobby or out and about and and some of you live here, some of you don't. But I would love if you want to, you don't have to. But yeah, like answer some of these questions with us. Some of the things that, some of the questions that were brought up that KJ did.
I was talking to someone from Seattle who goes who attends our podcast and he did not have a forum to discuss the things, and so he and I talked on the phone and
that's awesome.
and I was like, oh my gosh, this is the most cool thing, and so there is a vibrant conversation here happening. And
we're there. We read the comments. We would love to chat with you guys. So
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
This is weird and it's corny and
then
cliche.
You can't.
All right, sorry, gotta go. All right, thanks for the feedback. I felt like Jesus was like, hey, you need to remind someone of this. So, and it's good for all of us to hear, but I don't know who this is for. But I tell our youth ministry this almost every time I get the chance to talk to them. But I just want to remind you, Jesus loves you more than you can possibly wrap your mind around. So I know it's not really has anything to do with what we talked about, but it was just like, I don't know who needs
if that's
to
you
be
who
reminded
needed to
of
know that. Let us know in the comments.
Jesus' love is not going to end because of boundaries set.
Right. So I'm friends with Jay Baker, who is the son of Jimmy and Tammy Faye Baker.
Okay.
And so on PTL, so back in like the 70s
Son of a preacher
the
man.
80s, how they ended their television show every time was, guys, and Jesus loves you and so do I. And so
Nice.
Jay always says that is like poking fun, but saying that like Jesus loves you more than you can ever imagine. I don't know. Just
Like I
kind of
said,
made that part.
a little corny,
so Jesus
a little cliche.
loves you, and so do I.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye. We'll see you next time.